Welcome to today's talk. It's the fourth in a series of talks about my discoveries and research. This hopefully will tie in all the aspects of things that I've been talking about. This has been a very difficult topic to understand. It somewhat lacks science. But I believe that the occultists, the Illuminati, the illuminated ones, the mystery schools, they probably know all about this, and they've sold us a crock of guacamole. That's all I suppose I can say, really. I don't want to swear. So what I'm going to start with is it's a bit of a long journey and it'll be very difficult, but what I'm going to start with is how I discovered the field. I came from a business background, didn't know anything about anything really other than sales and stuff like that, the marketplace. So after those near-death experiences, I started to discover energy. Obviously I was affected by energy. I could feel energy, and I naturally could dowse. I think that most children that I've shown have the ability to dowse, and throughout time this is known as a phenomenon. And there is some science which produces results better than chance, but of course that's only with a small select group of dowsers, the top of their game, really, I suppose you could call it. So there's a couple of different types of dowsing, and I want to talk about the particular type that just naturally came to me. You've got your Y-shaped twig, and that was used for water divining, and you've got your pendulum dowsing. But and there are a number of other ones, but I preferred the dowsing metal rods. I made some up myself and started to use those. And so we can go on to, a lot of people say, well, this isn't science per se, but a lot of industry will use dowsers for mineral exploration and oil and gas and various other things. In fact, there's a company called Biolocation. These are the two gentlemen who invited me down to their labs in Oxford because they had hold of the book that I wrote. So it's actually used in industry, and you're probably not likely to get industry admitting to saying that it's using magnetics or dowsing principles to locate things. So the science world is fairly familiar with dowsing. It doesn't like it, and yet there is evidence for it. In fact, during my time, I was posting on a megalithic forum, not a well-regulated forum, but there we go. And I corresponded for a short time with a Polish physicist. I think he was a quantum physicist, who sent me a drawing of his dowsing. In fact, I know that Peter Hodges, the geologist that has assisted me, one of his friends was used to run dowsing courses. So it's familiar throughout the science world. There is some scientific evidence, and that some quality dowsers can beat chance. So what I wanted to do is show the dowsing technique, or how I started to map the field. So what I would do is I'd have a pair of metal rods, and what would happen is that I would shuffle across a magnetic field, and the fields would the rods would move and run parallel to each other. And so what I've done is I've put a little video clip of me putting my toe onto a cable, and as you touch that cable, the rods will move. As you come off that cable, they just open up back out. So using that dowsing technique, and I really need to describe it a number of times, so I'll start with drawing that I created based on the methodology that I used for dowsing. What I would do is I would set a compass bearing, and I would move through an energy field. As the rods moved, I would drop a marker T, and those T's would be put into position. You notice that in the picture that I put up on this video, there's some yellow T's, and far out in the distance there's some red T's. So what I did is that if I was looking for a north-south field, I would set the compass to west, and I would move through those fields at 90 degrees and drop a couple of T's, markers. Then I would move either further north or south and re-enter the field again, and eventually what you would create is a line, an energy field, and you would mark that out and measure it. Obviously then when you were looking for a west to an east field, you would spot your compass in north, and you would travel through those fields, dropping and marking T's. Obviously during this process we would set up from the original surveys, we set up a known position, what surveyors called a control position, or surveying control. And so everything then was controlled back to those points as best as we could. Obviously we didn't have the state of the art technology. So in this drawing what we have is a field of energy which goes west to east, and it aligns itself with the supporting stone of the burial chamber in Tinker's Wood. What you'll also notice is that I've got a couple of little drawings, and that was my first attempts, or early attempts, in 2004 to put together how the field meets. So what you notice is that there is a cross shape, and there are three fields meeting from the north, south, west, east, and the northwesterly fields. That creates a pattern, and then I started to build the field. So the control was set to a pair of split stones. Very interesting, tilted, and we controlled everything to that point. So what I've chosen is a couple of drawings. This is the 3rd of the 4th. The time was 10 o'clock till 11. And this is when we first discovered what I classed the paired split field. And what I will do is I'll give a little AutoCAD drawing as to how the paired split field later on, how it works. So using the same technique of shuffling through the fields, we got our drawings. Again, we were building up the control of the positions of the stones, and this is, as I moved along the in a northwesterly direction into the field, the dowsing rods did a very strange thing, and I saw this over a number of times, and I suddenly realized what was happening. It would be like a set of butterfly wings flapping slowly. They would open and close and open and close, and so I had to slow down the way that I went through the southwesterly field. And as I slowed it, I just let my toes touch the energy field, and that was when the rods started to move. I dropped the marker. As I came off it on my heel, I dropped another marker, and I found the first paired split field. I obviously moved in a southwesterly direction, a northeasterly direction, to come back through that field again in a northwesterly direction. So you're coming through the field at a right angle, and eventually I tied all those back into the control drawings, and I found that those two paired split fields aligned with the two standing stones at the other side of the in between the two the fence on the burial mound in Tinkins Wood. So that was the first time that I became aware of the paired split field. So what I've done is I want to talk about the movement of the field, because this is not a static field, and it's very difficult. So what I've done is I've introduced two drawings, my reference TW2700304, and the following day, which is the 28th of March 2004, both at the same time. So I wanted to try and establish some sort of a similarity to see what differences we had, a compare and contrast. And so the first drawing contains a field which is north-south, one that's west-east, using the same technique. We have a northwesterly field and a northeasterly field. The northeasterly field touches the two paired split stones, which I've just shown from Tinkins Wood. What was interesting with this particular drawing survey was that one of the fields came and hit the center of the support in the larger supporting megalithic structure which supports the capstone. Now obviously that in Tinkins Wood there's a wall in front of that capstone, so you can't see the base of it or the supporting stone. And we had various readings of 1.75 from the edge. So I was a little bit confused, because most of the other fields that we'd had up until those dates had hit the ends of stones. Probably we just got lucky and we noticed that they were hitting the edges of the stones. So this was a massive question as to why it's hitting the middle of a stone. We couldn't understand it, and I thought that at the time, the theory of megaliths standing on ley lines was out the window. Didn't have any future. I was certainly confused by the results, because I always thought that they were supposed to, or I had generally built up an idea that these stones were standing on the energy fields. Obviously it was a little bit disheartening to the research, and I couldn't understand it, but you'll have to go with your results of what you've got. So the following day, this is a following survey, the north-south fields had disappeared. The paired split fields ran through those two megalithic standing stones towards the burial chambers. There's a nice picture of the two paired split stones. So there was obviously a difference between just the 2 days. They were recorded at the same time. We have another field that was, as I said, that was hitting the center of the supporting stone, which created great confusion. We have the disappearance of the north, south, and east-west fields. We have an expansion of the field which is marked in green, and a movement behind another megalith. We have a contraction of the red field. It was on the outsides of the two paired split stones, and it's now moved to the inside of one of the stones and on the edges of it. And so we had a fluctuation within a day of two different fields. So we began to put together that this field is not a fixed field, it's a moving field, and that would be logic for energy. But we also, after many such drawings, had a problem, which was that one of the fields coming from the running westerly had hit that central supporting megalith, and there was no reason in our mindset as to why that occurred. I suppose I should talk about the St. Leathan's survey that I did. I didn't draw it as such. It was just a couple of dowsing rods and markers, and what I did is I walked across the face and I walked across the sides. I laid out the markers, and the same effect that had occurred in Tinkin's Wood occurred at St. Leathan's. And so, because there was no structural wall in front of St. Leathan's or on either side of it, I could see the base of it. Now there was a pile of stinging nettles growing at the base of the megalithic structure, and one of the fields that I dowsed, I cleared them down and knocked them down, and I found a little cutout or a slit at the bottom of the stone. And so I began to realize that they weren't hitting the center of a stone, or they weren't marked. The megalithic builders had actually marked the ley lines or magnetic fields where they would hit the standing stone. I went on to the inside of St. Leathan's, and that slit or cutout was there. Obviously, you can imagine how overjoyed I was to find that this really was an anomaly, and how blown away I was that the fact is that they bothered to mark the transitional fields, or the fields that move. And so I returned to Tinkin's Wood, and I had a look at the inside of the burial chamber, and there were the slits that I'd surveyed. The one slit, which is about 500 millimeter from the edge, I've referenced as TW. It was an unnamed drawing, undated drawing, sorry, and that was one of the first ones that I had. And I have the TW270304 drawing, and I think that was 1.75 meters from the end. Obviously, dowsing techniques are going to have a high tolerance of error, but the one with St. Leathan's was pretty clear and aligned pretty precisely to those slots. We then found these slots, so I don't believe that these slots happened by chance. These are actually markers of the energetic field and its movement. They conduct the field through the stones. So obviously I have to describe how the paired split field theory developed. So what I've put together is a demonstration of the AutoCAD observations. Now, there are two ways I can describe this. One is through mathematical formula, which I was due to get translated back in 2004, but unfortunately an association fell apart to the observation, but that would have left it only understandable by mathematicians. So what I've done is put together a drawing of AutoCAD observations, and I'll describe what I'm drawing. So what we have is a north field, or north-south field, and east-west field, and those two fields, if they're equal size or equal intensity or magnetic flow, they will create a square. So they will create points of intersection. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and because the widths of them are exactly the same, point 2 and 3 are opposite each other, 1 and 4 are opposite each other. So if you imagine now energy fields on a northwesterly direction, intersecting that field, it will be drawn to the intensified magnetic field at point 1. As you get your second field, it'll be pulled to point 2 and 3, and point 4. So in effect, what is happening is the two fields are touching each other. And this is one of the first observations we had. So that this intersected energy field of the north, south, west, east pull into each of those corners. So that is one of the observations from the drawing. Now if the field from north changes, so again this can be expressed in formula, if the field it changes from the north, you will still have your 4 points of intersection, but what you will have is a rectangular shape. So if then again it is intersected by a 45-degree field or a northwesterly field, what will happen is something unusual, and this is how we discovered the paired split field. You will have one of the fields running through point 1 and point 3, and another field running through point 2 and 4, and hence you've got the paired split field. This took us years to understand. In fact, only revisiting after 10 years do I fully understand it. What you will notice in the center of that rectangular is a diamond shape. I'll reference that diamond shape later on in the talk. But this all goes towards building a picture of sacred geometry, what the occultists know and keep from us, and what we truly are, and how we interact with the earth. So we slowly were building up a picture of the field, and we noticed that all these fields intersect at 45, 22 and a half, 11.25 degrees. So what we're looking at now is a field that is 67.5 degrees, and it's running through the north field and south field which are equal to each other, but because the degrees have changed, it means that the ley line that they create is smaller, and obviously, even though that it's equal to each other, it creates a paired split field. So a lot of your stones, a lot of your smaller and recognized stones will sit on smaller energy fields. So what I want to talk about is running all these drawings and surveys, you start to build a picture of what the field is actually doing. The intersections, as long as you're disciplined in the dowsing process, and that is that is another difficulty with this research, because this magnetics is somewhat untestable. You start to build a picture of how the intersections work. Now this is just a north-south and an east-west field, and 3 other fields divided by 22.5 degrees, 45 and 67.5, and all those things we observe within our drawings. So what we created is one corner of a grid. We then matched them up with the other corners. We put another corner in, and another corner, and another corner, and eventually we started to build what we class as the field. So picture 1 that I'm referring to was probably one of the first ideas of the grid. Picture 2, because we developed the paired split field, you'll notice that there's 2 fields there. And picture 3 is actually a real interpretation of how it works, because what we've added to that is some of the 11.25 degrees fields, and then it becomes ununderstandable. So we've taken out the 11.25 just to give us a working model that we can at least recognize some pattern within it. As soon as you start adding in those other geometrical fields, you lose shape and pattern. So the field developed, and this is a drawing that I was using to try and explain the paired split field, but probably the drawing that I've just done is better. We simplify the grid, not because we want to fudge things, but because it makes it easier to observe what you're looking at. Obviously, the lower grid excludes the 11.25 intersections, or the divisions of 11.25. And it gives you this sphere that is constantly seen in sacred geometric terms. And so we have an understanding of the paired split stones. They sit on energy fields. We know that the field now pulses back and forth from wide to small and moves position. So during all the times that I was surveying, I would pack up, and at the end of the session, I would just walk across the face of the 2 split stones, and just map it. I wouldn't. These weren't formal AutoCAD drawings. There was enough to do to try and understand the amount of data that I was collecting and points that I was collecting, just on the 2.5-hour survey. So I'd walk the face of it, and I'd walk the end across the smaller ends where the splits are, and I eventually noticed that on each notch, or where the stone drops or rises, or there's a cutout, you have magnetic fields that would hit and run through at various different times So what these stones were doing were actually a map of the Earth's magnetic field at that point. And that just blew me away. Obviously, in the drawing that I've put for this talk, you will notice tiny little white lines. We've actually recorded, although they're not in great quality, in our digital photography base, of these lines pouring out of the tips of the stones. So we're pretty confident that this energetic field is there. It obviously needs funding in many different aspects. So what I wanted to do was just to test the magnetic effect. Was to I put a pot in between the two stones. I was floating a pin in there just to see if it altered the magnetics of the pin or got it to point to a different direction. But we didn't notice anything of that, and I left it there for a week. I came back, and that pin, I took it back home, and that pin, before I took it out, was not magnetized. When I brought it home, it would pick up 3 other pins. That's how strong it had become. It wasn't a powerful magnet, but it would pick up 3, maybe 2 pins, depending on the weight of them. So there's a little bit of evidence to say that there is a magnetic effect occurring. And so what I've got to talk about is a number of paired split stones that map the field, and stones generally that map the field. So obviously when we would dowse certain shapes or forms, we would come up with a part of the field. And these triangular shaped stones, this is a stone from Arthur's Stone in West Wales. And what you've got is the ley lines that correspond to that map. We also found the paired split stones, and these sit on the fields. So using my knowledge of the field, I discovered this paired split stone. It was buried. What you'd do is you'd come through the field at a 90 degree. You would then spot something in the difference, shuffle along the field until you found things under your feet, and then you just pull away the grass and uncover what you've seen. This is one of the ones from Carrick Dion, the ones that I referenced in one of the other talks. And so what you have is little notches which actually map the energetic field. So you have the triangular tips, which are common to the paired split stone, and what you have is a certain geometry that will run through these stones. There's a little notch at the bottom of the stone which creates another part of the field. So these are maps to the divine matrix. And so we have a number of stones that I now have a technique to find. The big ones, obviously, they were plain and simple. But the others I've dug out of undergrowth. You can notice how the earth has been pulled away from them. And what that is, again, mapping is the movement from a small field to a large field, doing no different than the paired split stones do in Tinkin's Wood. So I can use this technique of understanding the paired split field to find paired split stones. This was covered, it looked like a glacial erratic. I reference it in one of the other talks. It's probably the most complex. It's got a right angle cut in it, all the things that the ancient Bronze Age and Mesolithic builders aren't supposed to be able to do, and yet it's an amazing paired split stone. So I can find these, I can demonstrate that this paired split field exists, and I have posted a number of these on the megalithic portal. So I'll move the conversation on a bit more about the patterns that I have observed while drawing in AutoCAD. I can talk about them, but I have to talk about them and show them because it's important for this sacred geometry and how we see the world. This is an earlier drawing from 2003. It's a long barrow. I didn't use a tape measure. I had to pace it. I didn't take my tape with me, but I found that what happens was that they were crossing ley lines at the point of the chambers where they buried cremated remains within this long barrel. What I also noticed, it was very similar to a religious symbol that I'd seen, is the Greek Orthodox Church. And I thought, well, this is strange, and it wasn't something that sort of jumped out and said, oh, this is a Greek Orthodox Church. It was something that I thought, I wonder if this sacred geometry can be mapped from what I've learnt in the drawing of these AutoCAD surveys. So I want to just show you. I'm not suggesting this is an actual drawing. I've probably drawn this over time many times, but what I'm going to do is give you a demonstration of the process of what you do in AutoCAD, or what I was doing to translate the drawings. So that is if you take a west-east field and you draw your first line, it could be a couple of meters long or hundreds of feet long, doesn't really matter. You can then use the command called an offset command. What that then does is, if you've got a ley line that is, or an NG field that is half a meter long, you can offset it at 0.5 or half a meter, and it creates your second line. You can then copy those two and offset them to create your second line. So that would be a drawing technique that you would use. So as you then take your second part of the survey, the green lines, and you do the same process. And what happens is you start to see things that repeat time and time again within your drawing process. It's like a repeating pattern of shape and form. And over time I got to recognize it. So as you add other fields that you'd surveyed, what you've got is, again, that interesting diamond shape. And eventually, if you're looking at it properly or in certain ways, at the moment it looks, as I'm showing it, it looks like nothing. Until you hatch certain areas, and then you see what you've got. You have the Star of David. I used to roar laughing to think that actually the Star of David was just a design of our Earth's magnetic field. But then I used to roar laughing at all the other symbols that I found. This took time, patience, hard work. This didn't just happen. I didn't have an occultist book to read. I had nobody showing me. I was from business. I had no understanding of any of this. I had no points of reference, although I'd gone to church as a young man. Or not so much a young man, but up until probably 12, young boy. So I'd been to Sunday school and things like that, and so I'd seen a bit about other religions. So anyway, we go back to this magnetic field and the mapping of the magnetic field through our, ancient, our modern day occultist religions. That's all I can say about them, because they're not. If they really did truly preach the words of what I believe is our nature to be peaceful, then I wouldn't label them in such a way. So anyway, I came across. I wanted to have a look at ancient drawings. Obviously, I found the orbs and in the rock art, and I was running these projects. I ran the field project earlier, and I run the ore project later, and both of them fit together with each other. So I want to now talk about the Bloom Boss Cave project, and this is a interesting. It's believed they found a piece of red ochre. It was dated to 70 to 80,000 years, maybe 90,000 years. In the piece of evidence that I'll show, it states 70,000 years, although that's been adjusted. And they describe it as the oldest piece of art. So what I've done is, as a comparison, I've hatched in a couple of areas on the simplified grid that I've been observing. What you've got is the large diamond in the center. You have the small diamonds either side. You have the little tiny triangles that are higher, and you have the central line that runs through all the diamonds, and the two other lines touch the tips of the outside two and cut the tip off of the inside one. And what you will notice in that piece of red ochre is that they have similar drawing structures, and so our ancient ancestors were drawing for us the magnetic field, and we inherited into our religious symbols. We have lost our way. I mean, anybody can see the pattern recognition. I mean, these are things that are not fiddled. These things are a lot of hard work that I've years and years of study and analyzation of the field and the drawing effects that I've been creating. And so the next topic is, how many other of these ancient symbols are actually present in the field. Once you know how the field works, you can basically slot every single one of them into it. I mean, some of the curves, maybe not, but so you got the Greek Orthodox Church, a Star of David, St. Bridget's Cross. St. Bridget's Cross is an interesting Celtic Irish cross. It's supposed to protect you from lightning. Why would a religious cross protect you from lightning? It's quite simply because it understood that lightning and electromagnetism were linked to each other. That's the mythology. The Star of Ishtar links to the Anu and how energy in the universe is created. Obviously, you've got a Celtic cross, which is just a henge. So all these geometric shapes were actually just built into the landscape as henges. We have the Buddhist wheel. All of them pay in reverence to the Earth's magnetic field. That is simply it. I've put a picture of the St. Bridget's Cross. Another interesting symbol, as I was going through to prepare some of the evidence for this talk, I came across an old drawing that was discarded. It was a drawing of part of the field that was sort of placed off drawing and just left there. And obviously over the years I'd looked at numbers and numbers of symbols, and I realized that this was the pentagram, or the horned goat. I've left it in the way that I originally drew it. What I was looking for was a shape, and I'd hatched out some areas. So the pentagram, or the five-pointed star, with a point pointing downwards, so it's like they're pushing energy into the earth fields with their occultist rituals. Used in occult ritual to direct these forces or energies often represents Satanism, the horned god, or various expressions of contemporary occultism, especially when a goat head is superimposed on the inverted pentagram. So now, our occultists are using magnetic, no different than our religions are using the Earth's magnetic field, obviously, but they're using it in sinister ways. They are using it for the ritual, which I don't believe the ancients did. And so what I want to talk about how this the field creates energy, and a little bit about the anew and the occultists who've misled us, how this was known, and how this has been sort of scrambled from our images. Again, that's that drawing of spirals from a physicist in Poland, how they spin out of points where the two magnetic fields meet. This is a drawing that I did some time ago to explain the spin that is created when magnetic fields meet each other. So what I've done is a little drawing just to try and describe this, because this is not easy. Again, you would have to use electromagnetic and magnetic equations, and again, I'm not trained in that. So I'd like to show you a little drawing of how I believe that the spin occurs, and therefore what is classed by Sumerians and occultists as the anew. So if you imagine now an east field, which is then intersected by a north field, what will happen is those two fields meeting will create either a clockwise or anti-clockwise spiral. And again, or a clockwise and anti-clockwise spiral when they meet. So there are laws of electromagnetism and physics of where you get the right hand and left hand rule, where two fields, when they meet, they create spin. So this is the spin now that's spinning around those edges of those intersections of magnetic fields. But also what happens is there's a vertical force. So there's a force pushed out from the field. So we have the right hand rule, and we also have a left hand rule. Now somewhere in amongst all this is obviously occurring in nature. We can use it and manufacture certain products and use it, and so therefore it must exist in nature's natural forces. And of course I found it in the ley lines. Quite simply, it's there. It's there, we can use it, we can manufacture things that use those principles, therefore they must be in nature. And of course they are. So, I'll go back to a previous talk that I had, where I was describing how the megalith stood on ley lines, and how that force from those meeting ley lines will create a force through the stone and cause the stone to emit energy from it. That's the piezoelectric effect, which I talked about. So these meeting energy fields will also create a spiral. This is a picture of a spiraling field that we've recorded at a megalithic strike. And of course, all of this is pretty damn simple because it was known by our ancient ancestors. These spirals, clockwise and anti-clockwise, that link to each other, standing waves, if you want to call them that. You have the spirals of Newgrange. It's all very, very simple. And so what we have is where these points occur, where the fields meet, on the corner of those fields we get spin. You get spin, and it's drawn in ancient rock art. It's known throughout time. And the occultists use and understand this as the anew. The anew, or anshar, or kishar, they are the sky pivots, the sky axle, whatever you want to call them. But these are the parents of the Anunnaki, and so we have been absolutely misled by what our ancient ancestors were telling us, which they were telling us, we understand the earth, we understand the universe, we understand, we give it names that we don't understand, and it is only through our own ignorance that we have developed an arrogance, believing them to be savages. These were ancient, peaceful people. And of course, you have to ask yourself, well, why did this occur? There's a thing in occult chemistry for anybody interested. They describe matter as whirling polarized energy, chains of new particles linked together to form atoms. Any particles are constructed of strings and tiny bubbles, and they call it either ether, dark matter. So they know this. The occultists already know that these points of spinning energy, the anu, push energy into our universe. It is not a big bang. They already know it. They know that there are multiple points on fields of energy that are created by magnetic fields intersecting and planetary fields that create energy and matter. Our Earth produces its own matter, along with being bombarded by other cosmic particle and solar particle as well. That just travels down the fields. And so the anu is a torus shape. And also, what is interesting is this. Anu is the first alphabet of the Hebrew Bible. Hebrew alphabet. And so this stuff is known. The occultist studies know. I've covered about Isaac Newton. He was an occultist. He was chosen by God. And through Newton we have no God, because we have gravity, for his model of gravity forming the planets. And yet they know about the anu. They know about the spinning points in the skies. Isaac Newton believes in God, and yet tells us that we shouldn't. Or through his science, they tell us that there is no creative force. How insane are these occultists? Well, a Hebrew scholar, Zachariah Sitchin, who lies to us, and his Jordan Maxwell chum, Illuminati informers who just want to confuse us and hide the truth from us. These people are a disgrace. Of course, they would know what their own symbol meant. They would know that it was sacred ground. They would know that it was part of, the Earth's natural energy field. How twisted can you get? I mean, I needn't have to say about the Pentagon and their religious symbols built at certain positions on the Earth field. I don't have to tell you about the goat, the upside down goat head. Occultist chemistry, the illuminated ones, the people from the mystery school are all the same. And so what they talk about is a torus that spins and creates energy from a point. And so what I've done is a little drawing is to try and explain how the field produces matter. What we have is this one of the more complex grids that I've drawn. As ley lines become activated, they push energy through them, and they create a spin. So these ley lines are activating and pushing and pushing and pushing. It's really not a very accurate drawing, because what they should be is one field should be going one way and another should be creating another. So you have two one clockwise, one anti-clockwise fields that create the spin. And so you create your torus. And this creates the point of energy which produces energy. And so I'll refer back to how the orb, the massless particle, comes into our solar system. It is output by the field. And the field's movement outputs the old bar wave. The serpents. We can even talk about the serpent people. These serpents and waves, you can believe David Icke if you want to. But these serpents and reptilians, these are Sumerian drawings. They knew about the snake that flew in the sky, the rainbow serpent. The rainbow serpent comes from these toruses, or the points of Anu, the spinning points of the universe. They can be in the living room, they can be in space, they can be on the surface of the earth. And we have just been misled. Why we've been misled, who knows? And so we have the Orr-Bar wave. The Orr-Bar wave is a product of the field. Something that has been lost for 4,000 years, for the length of the Mayan calendar time. And I believe that this is due to be returned back to us. And I think it'll be an interesting time. So if you see this Orr-Bar wave in the sky, don't be frightened. It is a creative force that is natural. It is just that the occultists have misled us and hidden this sacred geometry from us. It is the consecrated ground of the divine magnetic field. One final thought, which is probably the craziest thought of the whole talk. This field somewhat displays consciousness. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. Goodbye.